Ladies and gentlemen, welcome wrestling fans worldwide to Knoxville and the Great Smoky Mountains for the Ron Fuller, Tennessee Studcast.
6 feet 9 inches tall, 265 pounds.
This historic podcast from one of the most respected and successful wrestlers and promoters will follow the footsteps of the largest and oldest wrestling family on the planet.
Listen to what I'm saying. That's right. Bring that camera in here a little bit closer.
Through 93 years and 4 generations.
The stud has arrived.
Old school or new fan, this unique broadcast will educate and captivate as Ron details decades of professional wrestling's growth with truly unforgettable stories.
I want those people out there at home to hear the stud.
Sit back and enjoy the ride with the Tennessee Stud.
The Tennessee Stud. You will learn that name. You will remember it.
And now,
the stud is here.
Hey everybody, welcome in once again. It's David Summers hosting another Studcast with the Tennessee Stud, Ron Fuller. It's the story of wrestling in America as told by the Stud, whose family started the profession over 100 years ago. Now we step back into the ring and back into time with the Tennessee Stud, Ron Fuller. Tell us what's going on in the Great Smoky Mountains, Ron.
Oh, man, beautiful. Getting cold, getting a little bit colder. Some of the leaves are going, man. I'm kind of disappointed in seeing that because some of the beauty's going to start dying at this point. But it's not my first rodeo up here, so I know kind of how it goes, and it's not going to stay beautiful until way on into the winter. So but it's still beautiful, man. Still in a pretty part of the country, still enjoying it, and wow, just looking forward, man, to cranking out another Studcast here, man. We kind of got a little roll going, man. I'm really enjoying these, and I'm hoping that all the fans out there listening are enjoying as well.
Hey, that sounds great. Hey, why don't we start, Ron, with this interactive booking game that you began last Studcast? And you offered all of the fans an opportunity to figure out where you were heading as the booker of Southeastern in a 3-week period of time between, I think you said, October 28th and November 11th of 77. You set us up with a question. This is going to help us guide us in the right direction, obviously. And then you ask who was going to turn babyface or heel and who would be affected by that turn. You posted, as you said you would, on all of the social media sites, the place for the answers. So let's get some results. Come on.
Well, I found out that we got quite a few potential bookers out there, man, that listen every week, and sharp dudes, and we had some great guesses, and 2 of them actually were correct. And, and I haven't actually got to the angle yet that I really wanted to. That's going to be next week. But I've still already got the answers to my question. And a couple of those guesses that didn't win were also correct, except they weren't the angle that I had in mind, because I'd forgotten, I got 2 or 3 angles going all the time.
Yeah.
And, they took a guess at it, and a few of them came up with another angle that was in the process at the same time. So it was exciting for me to see that fans could figure out more than one angle, and that the fact that I was working more than one angle at a time during that 3-week period. So I think on our today's training, each week that today's training that we do, man, is working. I feel good about that little segment we do on every show.
Yeah, I think you're obviously doing a pretty decent job training your listenership. So here's the deal. I can't wait to find out the correct guess and who got it. So, and who won? Who won, Ron?
Well, I can't tell you the winner yet.
I knew it.
I want to continue the intrigue, man. I've done created in 1977. This really good angle. And as a booker, I figure I got the right to keep my edge and keep the fans on the edge of their seat here, because the big angle has yet to happen. So I'm not going to give out those names until next Studcast when the actual angle I was talking about is going to occur. But I can figure out, who figured out the first angle that is going to happen on this Studcast of November 4th, 1977. And I'm going to announce that today in today's training. I'll tell you who figured the one that's happening into this show today. And it was a pretty darn good angle in itself. And so we got a lot going on in a little today's training today.
All right, so let me get this straight. Make sure I got this right. You're going to tell us the angle that will happen on this card and who guessed it, but that is not the angle you were looking for when you set up this booking contest last week. To me, it's kind of a testament to your booking ability that you had two or more angles going at one time during this particular time frame. So to me, that's what makes these Studcasts to me really interesting. So you give us a complete look deep into the business of professional wrestling that fans just can't find anywhere else.
Well, I try to do exactly like that, Dave. That's kind of my object here. And to be honest with you, I actually, in looking back at these two cards, I actually had four angles going. So it's my goal on every show to educate and communicate to the fans and as much as possible. And I want everybody to kind of know what was going on behind the big black kayfabe curtain, man. So, and there was a lot going on in my territories, and quite a few others were really hooked up too, man, where you had great storylines and so much happening that fans just hated to miss the TV because they were like, wow, what did I miss here?
Yeah. Yeah. So, all right. So, but before you do that today, Stud, tell us about what's happening in the Knoxville area again. And let's go back to what's coming to Knoxville Wednesday, the 24th, the day before Thanksgiving at the famous Calhoun's on the River restaurant. This is a cool deal.
Well, I'm having the second dinner with a stud, Dave. And this thing, man, it features a tremendous free barbecue buffet dinner. I'm going to give away two autographed 8x10 photos, one of myself and one of Jimmy Golden. We're going to have some great free door prizes from Cherokee Distributing Company. Wow, they gave away some tremendous stuff last one. I'm going to give away some more stuff myself, mask and some T-shirts and other things. And we're going to do that 1 hour live Studcast and a 1 hour live question and answer session. And plus every single person through the door going to be greeted by Les Thatcher, Jimmy Golden, and myself. And we're going to hang out with them after it's over. That's what we did last time for probably 30 minutes. And we're going to try to do that again. It was a fun time for everybody, Dave.
All right, and that's what I keep hearing from everybody that I talked to that had the wonderful opportunity to be there. I was not able to, and I hope I can make this next one. But so, I mean, the first one really was good. It was a once-in-a-lifetime experience for a lot of fans. So you get your tickets now the same way at tnstud.com. That's tnstud.com, Stud Store. You're also going to find a big souvenir table that's going to be set up there that night also. Fans can get everything that you talked about for only $30, and that's that's two free photographs of you and Jimmy. That's what those would cost alone. The dinner and all the other stuff, we'll just say that's free. So don't miss this incredible night. It's going to be one of those that when you come back to Knoxville, you're gonna want to do this over and over. So reserve your seats now at tnstud.com. Click Stud Store. Look for Dinner with the Stud. That's Dinner with the Stud under Stud Store at tnstud.com. All right, so I can't wait to get this one started. So where do we ride to today, Stud?
Well, we're going to start by riding into today's training, and we're going to find out who almost won the Booker's contest by guessing one of the two major angles the first 2 weeks in November of 1977. And next week, we're going to find out who both the winners actually were. So we're focusing on the card of November 4th, 1977 in this Studcast. There's a young wrestler on this card. We called him Ronald Pope, who his real name was Frank Goodish. And this guy was destined to become a huge star under the name of Bruiser Brody. He was in the main event after only 3 weeks in the territory. We will discuss that entire card on this one, on this Studcast, the TV that promoted it, the results of the matches, and the attendance. And I'll also give enough time. Given enough time here, I'm going to discuss where I was going after my loss to the Stomper in the loser leaves Southeastern match from the last Studcast. Kind of where we had a question, I believe, last week about where did Bob Armstrong go. Well, if I have the time, then in this one, I'm going to talk about where I went after I lost this loser leave town match. Then we're going to talk about the learning tree. We've got another question there about how the smaller cities in the Southeastern Territory were doing, considering that Knoxville had become one of the best wrestling cities in the world in 1977.
Okay, Ron, so let's talk about who almost won your booking contest in the first week. I loved your interactive idea of a contest with fans. I had no idea that there were two major angles being worked at the time. So explain to those of us not as in tune with booking as others what the first angle was.
Okay, well, that's understandable. All right, so we're going to focus on the first angle. Obviously, that happens on the card that's in this week's Studcast. And it's not the angle that I was referring to when the contest was announced. That angle, like I said, is going to be revealed next week for the card of November 11th. And we're going to be talking about November 4th in this one. And the next one, I'm going to introduce both the winners for the contest. And I want to read, this is because these guys don't just have it figured out. They're even got a pretty good way of describing it. So I want to read the exact words of the man who described the angle on today's card in the Southeastern Tag Championship match between the new champions, Joe LeDuc and Roy Lee Welch, versus former champions, Mr. Knoxville and Bob Orton Jr. They were managed, obviously, by Al Costello. And that gentleman's name was Jody McCoy. And this is the way that Jody McCoy described this first angle. He says, my prediction, after dropping Southeastern tag titles to Joe LeDuc and Roy Lee Welch due to Costello's negligence, Bob Orton Jr. will turn babyface, begin a feud with Mr. Knoxville, ultimately unmask Mr. Knoxville, reveal him to be Ronnie Garvin, thus continuing their feud before Joe LeDuc moves in to replace Orton.
Oh.
I was like, wow, man. So a very astute assessment, man. There's no doubt about that, of that angle and where it went, and a pretty concise way of explaining it, too. So Mr. McCoy, must have had an extremely good memory, or maybe he had some copies of the Knoxville newspapers where he could figure out by looking at the ads kind of what was going to be ahead. Either way, my hat's off to you, Mr. McCoy.
Right.
That's a great one. It's just not the correct angle that I wanted, but you certainly got one of the angles that was taking place on this particular night. And I've already removed the contest post about the Bookers contest from all the social media sites. I want to keep fans from getting more information on the two winners. And then I've also been very impressed with their predictions, and I want to preserve my last angle until it happens in the next Studcast.
Okay, so you know the deal, Ron. I got to guess that last week's loser leaves Southeastern match for both the Southeastern and TV trophy with Gorgeous George Jr., barred from the Coliseum, of course, and you facing the Mongolian Stomper was an angle in and of itself.
Well, I guess it was, Dave. It certainly was, man. And I think some of this wrestling talk and booking, man's rubbing off on you, Dave. There's no doubt about that. Now, I got one for you, man. So, you're getting sharper here. So, I got one for you. Let's just say on this card, and we're going to be discussing the one we're discussing in this Studcast. There are two guys in this on the matches and the card of November 4th, 1977, that are being carried out of the ring, and they're never going to return to Southeastern Knoxville again. And so I want to see if you can guess who those two guys are.
All right, you are on, Stud. No doubt. All right, I'll tell you what. Let's get to that card. November 4th, 77, in the Jacobs Building, Chilhowie Park, so I can try to tell tell you which two were actually carried out after I hear the card. How about that?
Well, obviously, you got to hear the card.
Yeah.
That makes sense, my man.
All right.
So I am going to give you the card at least. So the opening match was going to be my brother, Robert Fuller, and he's wrestling against who was pretty much an established star there, Jim Dalton at this point. And it was the second time that Dalton had wrestled Robert in the last 5 weeks. Irish Pat Barrett back on this card. He's a world star, man. He's not just a star in Southeastern. He's a star anywhere he goes in the world. And he's going to be meeting the pro in this one, and Doug Gilbert. That's going to be the second counter between those two in the last 6 weeks. So Ricky Gibson, Tony Charles. I hope you're getting all these names, man. These are the dudes now that's in this. On this card.
Mm-hmm. I got
Ricky
you.
Gibson and Tony Charles wrestling against Don Carson and the Assassin.
Right.
And then after the hair versus tag belts match last week, the new champions, Joe LeDuc and Roy Lee Welch. Roy preserved his hair, all of it, right down to his scalp. And they are defending in this one for the first time against the former champions, Mr. Knoxville, Ronnie Garvin, and Bob Orton Jr., and they're managed by Al Costello. The main event, I mentioned a little earlier, it had a 3-week newcomer with great talent between territories at that time. That's how we got him. He just called up, said, "Look, man, I'm looking for a place to go for 3 weeks. I'm going somewhere after that." And so we brought him in. He didn't even know what he wanted to be called. And so we named this guy Ronald Pope. And his real name was Frank Goodish. And he's later on going to be known by the world as Bruiser Brody. So on this night, he's managed by my brother Robert, who is very upset about what happened to me the week before. And to prove Pope's potential, Ronald Pope's potential, he was getting a very rare, after only 3 weeks in the Southeastern Territory, title match against a Mongolian Stomper managed by Gorgeous George Jr. Okay, Dave. Who are the two guys on this card that are going to be carried out and never be back in Southeastern Knoxville again?
Wait a minute now. I just heard the card, so at least let me hear what was going to happen on the TV show, which I think would be the 29th of October, 77, 6 days before the card goes live, because typically that kind of sets it up, right?
Oh, well, see?
Okay.
I got you. You are getting on it, my man.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, okay, that's fair enough. So let's dive into that TV. Now, this one opens with Les Thatcher running down a great TV card. 3 tag matches, plus there's a young star on this TV that's destined for greatness, man. And then when the camera's back away from Les's close-up on the set behind him, was a giant steel frame shot of me with the Fuller leg lock on the Mongolian Stomper. And then when you look closely, there's no referee to be seen in this shot. It's just me with the hold on Stomper, middle of the ring. And the referee had been ejected from the ring after a collision he'd had with me just before I got the Fuller leg lock on the Stomper. So then the cameras back off and they pick up my brother, Robert Fuller. And behind Rob stands a young guy, got a young face, man, big dude, giant young man, about 6'8", probably close to 300. Had this dark black beard that seemed like it surrounded his whole head, man. And, for Southeastern TV fans, if they hadn't been to matches in the first 2 weeks, they got their first look at Ronald Pope, alias Bruiser Brody. And if they hadn't been to any live events, they were probably a little bit shocked. I mean, this guy looked anything but a typical baby face. He was like, wow. And he was just as rugged and nasty with his disposition as he looked, man. And it was just what old Rob wanted, man, after what was going to happen to me as he watched this video right there that day. He needed this type of guy. So Les began with an apology right off the bat to Rob about the night before. This had just occurred the night before where I'd lost this Loser League Town match. And he told Rob how it would go down in Southeastern history as one of the worst outside interference defeats ever in a loser leaves match. So Les then rolled the tape. So Rob pointed out right away that the match was over right there. Basically, Les, when Ron's got him in that leg lock, he said, that's his hold. And nobody ever escaped it once he put the Fuller leg lock on him. And if they failed to give up, they usually left with a broken leg. So, the Assassin and the Carson, Don Carson, arrived at the ring about this time frame. And Rob gets very angry, obviously. And he starts to explain to Les and the fans why he wasn't there himself. And 2 matches earlier in that night, this was last week's card, the last night's card, actually. And 2 weeks earlier, 2 matches earlier, Rob got cut by Don Carson. He was in the match with Carson. Carson hit him with the black glove. He got a bad cut, and he had to go to the hospital and get stitches. And he went to the hospital right before my match started. So there's nobody watching my back. And, and that was the reason that there was nobody watching it. And as it occurred on video, then Rob describes how Carson and the Assassin come in the ring. They stomped me off of Mongolian Stomper, and what should have been the finish of the match. And it should have been me getting my hand raised right there. Right. It should have all been over. And then Carson full Nelson me. And the Assassin got ready to headbutt me. And when he did, I ducked, and Carson got blasted by the headbutt. He went flying backward into the ropes and actually through the ropes and out of the ring. But the referee happened to be coming back into the ring exactly where Carson went out. And he collided with the referee, knocked the referee back out onto the concrete, and he went out on the concrete too. So, then Rob said, gosh, Les, he said, I have seen this before. And he goes, I don't think I've ever been so proud of my brother of what he did. He's fighting 3 men by himself in the rest of this match. And the video's continuing, and he described my going after the Assassin, which I did. After he had headbutted the wrong guy, I went after him. I started kicking his rear end and hitting him with a few wraparounds. And then finally the Stomper got up and grabbed me from behind, and he held me. So this time the Assassin didn't just he'd go for his headbutt. He loaded his hood. And again, when he went to headbutt, I dropped. And the Stomper took it this time, man. And he went flying backwards and from the headbutt, and he's down. He's down and practically out. So I started on the Assassin again, just me and him again. And this time I put my Fuller leg lock on the Assassin. And the referee's trying to climb back in the ring again, but Carson's trying to climb back in the ring at the same time. And camera picks up that Carson grabs the referee, and he jerks him off the apron, and he just throws him across the concrete floor, slides across the Coliseum floor and away from the ringside. Then Carson gets back in the ring. He loaded his glove, and there I am, laying with the leg lock on the Assassin. Both of us are on our back. Our legs are locked together. I can't go anywhere. I'm completely helpless. And he loads his glove, and he comes right over. And what does he do? He nails me, man. So, and that's it. That's all he had to do. And let go of the Assassin. So Carson grabs the Assassin. He rolls him out of the ring. And then, I'm just laying there. I'm out. And he drags me to the center of the ring. Then he goes and gets the Stomper, who's been headbutted by the Assassin. And he drags the Stomper and puts him on top of me. And then he leaves the ring. The referee finally crawled up into the ring, and he had not seen anybody really. He didn't see the Stomper. I mean, he didn't see Carson. He didn't see the Assassin, and so he crawls over, Assassin's on top, he counts me out. Rob, at that point, he went a little nuts. He asked, it really got to him about what a horrible job that they had done on me, and he asked Les if he'd ever seen a bigger screw job than that. He said, 1 man against 3, and that now he was definitely going to be at ringside the next Friday night. that he was going to be in the corner of one of the nastiest men he'd ever seen in the ring. And he looked over his shoulder at Ronald Pope, who was actually Bruiser Brody. And when he called him one of the nastiest men they ever seen in the ring, he wasn't exaggerating. And he said he was going to watch this young star take the Mongolian Stomper Southeastern belt and then run him and Gorgeous George right out of here. So the fans, man, they were getting fired up by this point, more fired up by the second. And so was that young Bruiser Brody standing behind him, man. He was ready to go. So Rob and him left, and they were left to go right straight to the ring. And wow, in that match, Brody absolutely horrified everybody in the studio with a violent display in the ring, man. A display of punches and kicks and big bumps, single arm body slams, all kinds of different crazy bumps. Whoa. And it happened to be the Brody's wrestling the pretty unpopular heel, big old fat Tony Peters. They both were about the same weight, but there was no comparison to their bodies. You know, Peters was a big old fat guy, and by gosh, Brody was in shape. And yeah, so he threw Tony Peters over the top rope. He was more heel than the heel. That's basically what it was. He just threw Peters over the top rope. He didn't care. He got disqualified. And then he went out and he found a steel chair over by the corner, a long way away from the ring. He had to search out for him a chair. And he loved to use those chairs, Brody. He used one on me in Japan. And I got to use one on him, too, before we left. So I equaled it out. Yeah. But he went outside and he found himself a steel chair. And he used it on big old Tony Peters. Not just once, but 3 times he hit him with that chair. And the referee disqualified him while he was still outside the ring. The referee watched it from the ring. He just says, "Oh, ring the bell. This is over." You know, and then the referee, Rob didn't mind the way that the kid handled himself. You know, no. He was ecstatic about this big man and what he was going to do the following Friday night. And the studio crowd was just as ready for it as Rob was, man. They were like, "Wow, this guy's nuts, man." So they went back to the set with Les, Rob and Ben Brody, and the Stomper and GG went into Studio B. GG was extremely upset by what he had just seen, obviously, and he said something to Les. He's talking to Les, even though he's in the studio by himself, and he says, Les asked her, "I can't believe Southeastern's going to allow a madman like that to wrestle my champion." He said, "Somebody's going to get hurt and hurt bad." So when Rob got a chance to talk, he was on fire, man. Bro, this young kid had lit him up, man. And he said, GG, you're exactly right, because somebody is going to really get hurt, and it's going to be the Stomper and you that's going to get hurt, and the studio fans were just going nuts. This young star, man, he had made a tremendous impact on his first TV show.
Yeah, it sounds like it. What a great way to start a TV show. So, all right, so who was next?
Well, the 2 guys that had done the dirty work in the video, just watched from the night before, they were in it. The Assassin and Don Carson popped out there, man, and they're in the second match. And boy, did they arrive to ringside to an angry crowd. They weren't really... at this point, they had such heat, man. They didn't didn't take them long to dispatch a couple of young guys that was in the ring with them, and they were eager to get to the set because they wanted to talk and brag about their conquest of the Tennessee stud, Ron Fuller. And so Ricky Gibson and Tony Charles were in Studio B. They're going to be wrestling those 2 guys the following Friday night. And they started things off talking about the video of the match that they had just watched back in the dressing room on the monitor, man, and how a rotten a wind the Stomper had gotten over Ron Fuller, man, because of the 2 guys that they were facing the following Friday night. These 2 guys are the reason, Carson and the Assassin, and geez, somebody needs to do something to you guys for this. That's just a terrible way to beat somebody. So so then it came Carson Don's time, and and they kept that same subject matter as the focus, man. They just stayed right on this video, and they bragged about how stupid I was not to have someone watching my back. And then Carson bragged about how he had intentionally, loaded his glove with the high-powered stuff. And he said, when I hit Robert Fuller, I intended to send him to the hospital so he wouldn't be there when we take care of his brother a couple matches later. And so, he said that they now had made good on their promise to send more fan favorites like Bob Armstrong and now Ron Fuller packing, and that their goal of controlling Southeastern was well on its way, that the Tennessee stud was gone, Bob Armstrong was gone, and who's next? They were looking at each other. Who's next? So, then they kind of returned to that sinister side, man, saying it wasn't long now until they were ready to pull the trigger on that deal with the devil. And everything was going perfectly. And look out, Southeastern fans. I think they said something like that. And major changes are on the way. And this wrestling company is going to look a lot different in the very near future.
All right. So a really cool show so far. No doubt about that. The personality profile is going to be coming next with Mr. Knoxville, Bob Orton Jr., and Al Costello. But we're close to a break, so let's get ready to do that. And let's remember that you can find Southeastern Rewind on YouTube. Subscribe, ring the bell, and they'll ring your bell when the greatest stories in wrestling are dropped on the YouTube channel at Southeastern Rewind. And make sure you tell your friends about Southeastern Rewind as well. All right, we're going to return after a few words about Southeastern Rewind from Ron and me. And this show will continue right after this. Okay, episode number 225, and we're taking a break. And Ron, your Southeastern Rewind YouTube channel is fast becoming the place for old school wrestling history. Tell us some of the big things that are happening on the Southeastern Rewind channel right now on YouTube.
Well, geez, Dave, there's a lot going on, man. There's 14 USA TV shows, and a new one of those is added to the mix every week. There's 3 award-winning Continental TV shows already on there, and a new one of those is added every week. There's one tremendous Southeastern show from 1978, an original show that's on there. It's had almost 4,000 views. It is really, really popular. The last 4 Studcasts are on there, and we're about to add this one to it. So, we're going to add Studcast to it every week from this point on. There's 2 Southeastern sweet spots on there and more of those to come. There's the first live dinner with the stud on there that has both the Studcast. One of them has the Studcast on it. And the second live Studcast one has hilarious, man. It's a question and answer, 1-hour show that was done live. With myself, Les Thatcher, and Dr. Tom Pritchard. Great show, man. You got the Funk Brothers on there with a never-before-broadcasted interview from the 1990s. You got 2 recent stud stories about the history of NWA champions Lou Thez and Pat O'Connor and my matches that I had with them. And I'm going to be doing 9 more of those NWA World Champion stud stories. Each one of them is guys that I wrestled, and I'm going to do one of those every week, and we're just going to continue adding to it, man.
Hey, that's cool. But I mean, you've already done Lou Thez and Pat O'Connor, so those are only going to get better. This Southeastern Rewind channel, Ron, is really blowing up. And if you've not already subscribed and you want to see and hear what the Tennessee stud produced during his career in this sport, or just get a feel for what he does now, then go to YouTube, Southeastern Rewind, and subscribe today for the very best in old school wrestling history. Ring the bell icon there and get your bell rung every time something new is added to the channel. Don't be no fool. Old school is cool on YouTube's Southeastern Rewind. You got to check it out on YouTube. All right, welcome back into episode number 225. The second segment is underway. All right, Stud, so what went down in the personality profile of this particular TV show?
Well, Al Costello, he brought his two former Southeastern tag champions to the set with him, and Les welcomed them. And they did the profile live in front of the studio audience, right there, only a few feet away from the audience. And they might have no longer been be the current tag team champions at this point, but boy, they still had a whole lot of heat. So Les was prepared during this particular profile to drive a wedge between the three of them. They were already having problems, and I think Les wanted to really let's get this thing cranked up big time. So what he did is he had prepared some videos. He had gone back 3 weeks, and he started with these little video snips from the title matches and the matches that these guys had had in the last 3 weeks. And instead of showing the matches, he showed the little altercations at the end of them that had taken place about 3 different times with Al Costello making a mistake that cost his men. And each time it had to do mostly with Bob Orton Jr. and Al Costello.
Mm-hmm.
So Mr. Knoxville, Ronnie Garvin, was always trying to settle the other two down. But Costello watched a couple of these, 2 or 3 of these, and and you could see his face was turning red, and he was like, "Wait a minute, what are you doing here?" And the 2 guys behind him, they were looking at each other, and they're, so then lastly, he asked the director, Bill Kincaid, he says, "Bill, would you please play the last one?" Which happened to be the worst one yet. It was their loss from the night before, where they actually lost the belt. And this time, it wasn't Costello's fault. Mr. Knoxville and Bob Orton Jr. were working great as a team, but they just couldn't get the pin on Roy Lee Welch during the course of this match. And Joe LeDuc could sense his partner wasn't maybe not going to be able to make the tag. He's not going to be able to survive. And he did something that's very rare that you get away with, but somehow the referee let him get by with it. He just basically, without Roy actually tagging him, just came in and started making the comeback. Illegally, obviously, without a tag from Roy. He threw Mr. Knoxville out of the ring. He put a bear hug on Bob Orton Jr. And the referee, after he kept the bear hug on for a little bit, started to count him out, was going to disqualify him finally. And at about the count of 4, Joe dropped the lifeless Orton on the mat, and Roy covered him, So the referee then grabbed Joe, and he was very physical at this point. He's like, "You got to get out of the ring. You're not even supposed to be in here." And he starts trying to get Joe out of the ring. So Mr. Knoxville climbs up on the top rope, and he's going to jump off, and Roy's back. Roy's laying on top of Bob Orton Jr., but he's really not very knowledgeable about where he is in the ring at this point. But he had more going in his favor than you would have expected, because when Knoxville jumped from the top rope, Royce moved off of Orton Jr. and Garvin land right across Orton Jr.'s chest. So LeDuc then tackled Mr. Knoxville. Obviously, when Mr. Knoxville, Garvin jumped up trying to make the save here because Roy just fell right back on top of him again. Here came LeDuc. He grabbed Mr. Knoxville's legs. He held on to him, and the rest were history, man. All 3 of the losers got into a big argument on the profile set, right there on the set at this point. Now, studio crowd, they were encouraging it, obviously. They loved it. So go on, fight, So then they just all clicked on them. It seemed like the same time. They suddenly, all 3 of them just turned on Les. They finally realized what Les was doing. And now they all 3 had a common enemy. And the fans began to boo, man, because they all 3 got in Les's face. They were really about to put their hands on him. And Les ended the profile pretty quickly, and he asked for the announcer. He more like begged for the announcer, Phil Rainey, to ring the bell for the next match, because he knew these 3 guys were in the next match.
Yeah, enough's enough.
He says, "Phil, ring the bell. Ring the bell." Because I'm going to get my rear end tore up here if you don't. So they obviously went right straight into the ring, and they kind of started making up right there in the ring. They started hugging each other before the bell rang, and then when the bell rang, boy, they demolished their opponents, man, in short order as usual. And Orton used his backbreaker and dropped the guy on his head, and then Garvin, Mr. Knoxville, jumped off the top rope and another one's throat, and then they all three celebrated in the ring afterward, man, before we were going to the set, man, for the next interview. So they had pretty much made up, man. So the next tag champions, the new ones, Joe LeDuc and Roy Lee Welch, were in Studio B. They had their belts. They're going to talk about their upcoming title defense. They were having given a return match to the champions. And the studio popped when they saw these new tag champions with their belts for the first time. They loved this team of Roy and Joe. And, they started Roy and Joe both by thanking all the Southeastern fans for their support. And they gave all the credit, man, for their great victory the night before to the fans themselves. And if they could, they'd give the fans the belts because they earned them. And then Costello and his two men were still angry with Les. They're at the set with him, and they started then to accuse him, trying to break their great team apart. You're trying to break up our great team. And they declared that the last TV match was proof that it hadn't worked. What you just saw a minute ago, Les Thatcher, Al Costello was saying is exactly what we're all about. And you haven't messed up anything here. We're more, and they ended up with thanking Les, man, actually thanking him for what he tried to do and how it had backfired on him. They ended up saying they were more of a team now than they'd ever been, and they were going to win their belts back next Friday night. So Joe and Roy were wrestling in the last of the 4 matches on the TV. And it was their first one, obviously, since winning the belts the night before. And wow, what an ovation they got. The celebration was on in the studio, man. And it was probably on at homes all across the Southeast as well, man, because this team had been pretty much unbeatable. And Joe and Roy were really, really popular. And so they were about to finish their opponents and get the last match over. And here came out of nowhere all three of the 2 former champions and their manager, Al Costello. And Roy and Joe, they weren't prepared at all for it, man. I mean, they just banged. They, from out of nowhere, came actually from 2 different sides of the studio. And they hit the ring. And the referee was the first guy they threw out. They got rid of the referee. And after only a couple of minutes, they had both Joe and Roy Lee bleeding, man. They were really, really just tearing them up. And,
wow.
So those 3 guys finally left the ring, but not before Tony Charles and Ricky Gibson had to come and save Joe and Roy. And they left Joe and Roy laying there, man, bleeding. So, and this time, after the 2-minute commercial break, a bloody Joe LeDuc and Roy Welch, they went to the set to join Les. They exchanged a bloody towel. They were wiping the blood from their faces as they were trying to talk in the last interview. This basically one would make a big swath of blood off his forehead and hand a towel to the other one, and it just was passing it back and forth.
Wow.
And now in Studio B was the most fired team of the day, man. It appeared Al Costello had his team back. And, the way they looked there in this last interview, they might get their belts back right away. They were the ones doing the celebrating at the end of the show. And it was basically going to be a classic and historic tag match 6 days later in Knoxville.
Wow.
Okay, Dave. Now you know who was on TV and who were the 2 wrestlers going to be carried. So who were the 2 wrestlers to be carried out of the ring the next Friday night on their last Southeastern show?
All right, this has not been easy. I think that since you said Ronald Pope, later known as Bruiser Brody, was only there for 3 weeks, maybe the Stomper did a real job on him to get himself over big, as if the Stomper needed that. Then Al Costello was, I guess, kind of a frail guy and older and could be ending his run as a manager. So I'm going to guess he was the other guy working his last night ever for Southeastern. How about that?
Look at you, my man.
What?
You're 100%.
100%. Oh, I was looking at least for 80%, so I'll take it.
You got it all, man. You're really getting there.
Well, I'm learning a few things and ready to start booking any day that you are ready to set me up, Stud. So, all right. So, what happens on the matches November 4th of '77?
Well, after losing the loser leave match, I didn't go to matches in the Southeastern for a long time. Nowhere, none of them. And I tried my best not to even be seen much in public around town. I wanted the fans to know that I was away, that I had lost, and that I was no longer a part of it. I watched every TV show from my home in Knoxville, and then I would have Les come over during the week, and we would sit and talk about the next TV, and then he would, we'd talk about what happened on that Friday night. It was a little different, man. I had lost, and I wanted to be gone from the company.
Mm-hmm.
I needed to be. So Robert got a win, and that next Friday night, here's what happened, So Rob got himself a win over Jim Dalton, Irish Pat Barrett. He beat the pro. Great match. Wow. Beautiful finish. Guy's going to be a big star. Don Carson and the Assassin won over Ricky Gibson and Tony Charles. In the Southeastern Chag Championship match, the Al Costello, former champions, looked great until the end of the match. And boy, it all started to break down between them. And it started with Costello, real small thing. The guys are spinning down the ropes. I think it was Roy Lee Welch and Bob Orton Jr. were just kind of spinning down the ropes. One's back to the ropes, the other back to the ropes. And Costello reaches in there to trip Roy Lee, and he trips Bob Orton by mistake. And that kind of got it all started. And shortly thereafter, Orton was holding Roy Lee in the corner for Mr. Knoxville to finish him with a punch, and Roy ducked and Garvin hit Orton. Orton fell backwards off the apron. He landed on top of Costello, who stood in the corner always, and didn't see him coming. And now he took it personally that Orton had jumped off the ring on him. And then Orton drug Mr. Knoxville out of the ring and onto the floor, and by God, it all started.
Wow. They
began to fight. It was so, and the building was going crazy. The referee counted the Costello team out for fighting on the floor. They made no attempt to even re-enter the ring. They didn't care. The fight was on. And, the referee raised Roy and Joe's hands. He gave them the belt, and they left the ring, and the fight was still going on out on the floor. And so then as soon as they left the ring, Orton and Garvin rolled up into the ring, man, and it was very clear, man, how Costello, who he really liked, though, at this point. He'd had a lot of problems with Orton. And, Garvin and Orton are fighting now inside the ring. Costello attacked Orton from behind. Him and Garvin double teaming him. And it was clear at that point who the fans wanted. They started really getting behind Orton. and so Garvin and Costello, they're double teaming poor old Bob Orton Jr. by himself. And Mr. Knoxville slammed Orton, and he set him up in the middle of the ring. And then he went up on the top rope to do the old knee drop off the top, man. And when he did, Orton moved. Knoxville landed hard on his knee, really hard. And he had so much momentum going forward, and he hit so hard on his knee, it kind of shot him face first between the top and the second rope out into the floor. And you could tell he was laying out there and holding his knee. He was pretty bad. He was in bad shape. So Costello, because Orton is still kind of down, Costello started on him, man, trying to keep him down, maybe until Garvin could come back, but he couldn't do it. Garvin wasn't able to come back as soon as he thought, and finally Orton soon started to overpower Al Costello. Al had a little age on him, and he was no contest for Orton. And then Orton really beat the hell out of him, which the fans enjoyed, and then put him on his back in the backbreaker. And the crowd exploded then. They were like, wow. this is great. After all this time with this team and seeing what's going on with them now,
Yeah.
and then Orton jumped up and down several times, and while he had him in that hole, which just made the back pain more more hurtful in that back area, man, when he jumped like that. And then he walked over real slowly to the ropes where Garvin was still down laying on the concrete holding his knee. He was really having a problem with his knee. And then he just he had still had Costello on his back, and he looked over there and he saw Garvin, and he just dropped Costello head first on top of Mr. Knoxville on the concrete floor.
Whoa.
And it was such a nasty looking bump that the crowd, there was a big gasp from the crowd. They quit cheering. They went like, "Oh God, he's killed him," And even though they despised Costello, I don't think they wanted to see him get hurt that bad.
Right.
And it looked like it killed him, right?
Yeah.
From the camera angle, it looked like it killed him. So then Orton went to the dressing room, and the crowd cheered him all the way to the Hills dressing room, and he went in the Hills dressing room. So Mr. Knoxville, he finally got himself up on his feet, but his knee was really hurting him, and you could tell he couldn't really straighten out his leg, and he couldn't help Costello. He couldn't get Costello to his feet, and he finally had to leave him. So he left Costello, and Costello was laying there, and then Ronnie hobbled back upstairs where the dressing room were, and this was in the Jacobs building, so he had to go up there, and with his bad knee, he managed to go up the stairs. And he got to the dressing room. And when he entered the dressing room door, Orton was waiting on him. And Mr. Knoxville, man, the first thing you saw was Orton, was Knoxville disappearing into the dressing room. And then he came out the dressing room door, thrown out of the dressing room. And Orton came out with a chair and hit him in the head. And the crowd now, both upstairs and down, were just on fire, man. It was like, this ain't going to stop. It just was everywhere, all over the building. So the rescue squad finally had to come. The Chilhowee Park had a rescue squad that most facilities had, and they came to help out Costello, and he was hurt really bad. And, they did as much as they could for him, and then they called an ambulance. And Mr. Knoxville, he didn't even go back in the dressing room. He hobbled out of the building, tried to disappear, I guess, in the night. And the ambulance picked up old poor Al Costello. And I doubt that crowd, man, in that, as much as they had seen in that building over the years, that they had ever seen anything like that before.
Wow.
So last match of the night, man, was extremely violent, just like the one before it, man. Robert Sett and Ronald Pope, who was that was a young Bruiser Brody's corner. And as with many of Stomper's matches, and with all of Brody's matches, there was plenty of blood in this match, man. Stomper got bleeding, and so was Brody bleeding. And the Stomper got a really strong win right in the middle of the ring. Unlike Brody's matches years later in the future, when he's not going to want to do jobs for guys, he's a young guy, and he understood that, hey, this guy is the king here, and you're just passing through, and you need to make him look good, and that's exactly what he did, man. And so Brody had only asked for 3 weeks when he came in. He was starting in another territory after that. We knew it when he came in, and like Sylvester Ritter, who was there, and we made him the junkyard dog while he was there with us in Southeastern. The junkyard dog went on to Mid-South Wrestling, and we had never seen Brody before, just like we'd never seen Sylvester Ritter before. He was still green, man, but you could see his potential, man, that he's going to draw a lot of money in the future. Stomper got a very valuable win for his future, and we'd get Brody back again for a little short run in Southeastern Pensacola in the early 1980s. So on this night, he completed his 3-week stay. He completed it by taking a stretcher ride to the upstairs babyface dressing room, and Bruiser Brody would never wrestle again in Southeastern Knoxville.
Wow.
And neither would Al Costello.
Yeah, I can certainly see that. Man, that's a crazy night. So attendance had to be pretty awesome.
Well, we'd gotten away with just over 4,000 a couple of weeks earlier in the park there because there was no fire marshal. And I guess the word got around, and this time the fire marshal showed up, and he cut us off at about 3,800 tickets. But it was still a massive crowd in that building. One of the biggest, far more than should have been in there, I guess is a good way of putting it.
Yeah. All right, Ron. So we only have enough time for either the learning tree question or what you wanted to tell us you were doing after your loss in the loser leaves Southeastern match in the last Studcast. So your choice on this. What do you want to do?
Well, I think I want to talk about where I was going and what I was doing after that loser leaves match. We talked about Bob going back to Georgia and wrestling in the state of Georgia. And I really, at this point, needed badly to finalize a purchase of one of the two territories that I had been looking at for a year now. And that one of those two territories, one was in Ohio in the north, and on the south, on the Gulf Coast, was the Gulf Coast territory. And I couldn't keep working every night and ever get to make a decision where I wanted to build my next business because I needed to see those states. I needed to see those buildings there. I needed to meet the TV people. I needed to do the due diligence that was necessary to make the right decision as to which way to go. And I just didn't have the time. So losing this loser leave worked out to be a pretty good thing for me. But then I had another problem as well with what was going to happen to me during this time frame. I had committed about a year earlier to work 5 shows in St. Louis for their booker and a great friend of mine, Pat O'Connor. And between November 18th and December the 17th, I worked 2 Kiel Auditorium shows and 3 TVs, and the TVs were on Sunday. So I had to make 5 flights, and over the period of a month time, back and forth to St. Louis, working house shows on 2 of them and TVs on 3 of them. And then I took my final shot of the year in 1977. I went to Detroit, Michigan, 1 week before Christmas on December the 18th. I was going to meet the Sheik there. I was going to wrestle in the famous Cobo Hall in Detroit. And I was going to sit with Eddie Farhat, who was the Sheik, and try to finalize the deal to buy Ohio.
Wow. So that's got to be a memorable trip right there and a great story for another time. Hey, maybe next week. All right. So if you want to attend the second Dinner with the Stud Wednesday, November 24th, the night before Thanksgiving, you need to make your reservations by Sunday, the 21st of 2021. Don't miss this rare opportunity to share an evening of great stories and memories with other fans. Events like this don't come along often. Make your reservations now at tnstud.com. tnstud.com. Click Stud Store and find Dinner with the Stud. Only $30 for a truly unforgettable evening. Get on board the hottest YouTube old school wrestling channel, Southeastern Rewind. Subscribe today and enjoy great USA, Continental, and Southeastern TV shows from the 1980s. In the order they were produced, current Studcast, historic Stud stories, and a whole lot more. And get your Christmas gifts from the Stud Store this year. tnstud.com. Click on Stud Store. Autograph photos, T-shirts, Tennessee Stud mask, a great Continental DVD 5-pack with 62 matches, 12 hours of classic video action, Ron's brilliant Brutus novel, even autographed, and much more. tnstud.com. Click on Stud Store. And on Facebook, become friends with the legend, the Stud, on his Ron Fuller, the Tennessee Stud, or author Ron Fuller Welch page. Simply like and follow him there, and you automatically become friends with the legend, the Tennessee Stud. On Twitter, follow him as Ron Fuller Welch. And so, the next question, where are we riding next week, Ron?
We're going to announce, like I said earlier in this one, the 2 winners. of that recent booking contest, the one in today's training, and they'll be in the next Studcast, today's training. And we're going to hear what they described as the person and others influenced by the angle I mentioned 2 weeks ago. So we're finally going to get to the end of that interactive little question that I did. So, and then we're going to discover the new direction, man, of Southeastern. On this next card, which was November 11th, 1977, Mr. Knoxville is going to be wrestling against his former partner, Bob Orton Jr. Thunderbolt Patterson is going to come in full-time. Irish Pat Barrett is going to go up against Tony Charles next week. And the winner of that gets a shot at Nelson Royal's World Junior title the week after that, and much more. We're going to talk about a lot of events next week and a lot of matches, a lot of things that were happening. We'll talk about the TV that promotes this next November 11th, 77 show, talk about the results of the matches and the attendance. And then we're going to finally get to answer that learning tree question that I didn't get to today. And I think the question was how was the smaller cities in Southeastern doing since Knoxville had become one of the best wrestling cities in the world in 1977.
Yeah.
And as usual, Dave, I want to thank everyone for their continued support, of everything that I do. And please tell your friends and neighbors about us, and may God bless us all.
For Ron Fuller in the Great Smoky Mountains, I'm David Summers saying thank you for listening. Find me at davidsummersproductions@gmail.com. This Studcast is a David Summers production for Tennessee Stud, LLC.
Thanks for joining us today for this historic Studcast. The true story continues next week. So full Nelson your friends and point them in our direction for another ride with the Tennessee Stud.
1, 2, 3.
This is David Summers saying so long from the Great Smoky Mountains.